Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are on a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, to ask a question, press star 1 on your phone and record your name at the prompt. Today's call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to Jackie McGinnis. Thank you. You may begin.
Thanks, Alyssa. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm NASA Press Secretary Jackie McGinnis, and I'm joined today to provide an update on the Artemis program by NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy, Associate Administrator for Space Operations Kathy Lueders, and Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems Development Jim Free. Before taking your questions, I'll hand it over to the Administrator for an update on the program. Senator.
Thanks, Jackie. I want to start by sharing how excited all of us are on finally being able to get back to work on the human landing system, what we call Option A contract with SpaceX. Over the past months, there's been an intense focus on when we will land humans on the moon again as part of the Artemis program. I spoke last Friday with Gwen Shotwell, the CEO of SpaceX, which is the first contact we've been able to have about the HLS program, and we both underscored the importance of returning to the moon as quickly and safely as possible. And the decision by the court on Friday means progress for the Artemis program. But our team still need time to work through the specifics before we can give a detailed look at the HLS readiness timeframe. I want to give a shout out to our legal team as well as to the Department of Justice lawyers that argued in front of the federal court, which is the Court of Federal Claims. The human landing system is a crucial part of our work to get the first woman and the first person of color to the lunar surface, and we are getting geared up to go. NASA is committed to help restore America's standing in the world, and Artemis is certainly going to help us achieve that by assembling the broadest and most diverse international space exploration coalition in the history of this planet. NASA is committed to pushing the boundaries of what we know to be possible. Artemis missions will turn science fiction into science fact. We will make new discoveries, we will advance technologies, and we'll learn to live and work on another world. And we'll do this all the while inspiring the next generation of scientists, engineers, explorers, and other STEM professionals, the Artemis generations. We had extraordinary success in the Apollo generation. Now we are in the Artemis generation. And when we land the first woman and the first person of color on the moon, we'll inspire kids here and around the globe, showing that if they can dream it, they can be it. And put simply, the Artemis program is an investment in our nation's future, in American leadership in space, in science and discovery, in good, high-paying jobs across the country, and in technology spin-offs that will be leveraged here on Earth. And obviously, this is very ambitious. And the good news is that NASA is making solid progress at the Kennedy Space Center on Artemis 1's launch. The agency has completed the stacking of the Space Launch System rocket and the Orion spacecraft. I just saw it a week ago. We have a series of tests underway, The esprit de corps is very high. The wet dress rehearsal will be in January, and the targeting launch is in February. And that said, after having taken a good look under the hood these past 6 months, it's clear to me that the agency will need to make serious changes for the long-term success of the program. Our update for you today is this. NASA is committed to an updated Orion development cost of $9.3 billion from fiscal year 12 through the first crewed flight test, no later than May 2024. These updated cost and schedule estimates for the Orion program through Artemis II are as a result of an increase in the scope and the demonstration from the original baseline and other factors, including the delays caused by COVID. Now, these changes will result in an Artemis II mission, which is the first crewed mission, and that should be a potential launch date of May of 2024. And that mission will go out further than humans have ever been, probably 40,000 miles beyond the moon, and return to Earth. And our teams need time to speak now with SpaceX about the human landing system. We've lost nearly 7 months in litigation, and that likely has pushed the first human landing likely to no earlier than 2025. However, this crewed landing will be preceded by an uncrewed landing on the moon sometime before that human landing. There are other reasons. Prior to fiscal year 22, previous Congresses did not appropriate enough dollars for development of the human landing system. And then the Trump administration target of a 2024 human landing was not grounded in technical feasibility. Going forward, the Congress has made clear that there must be competition for the 10-plus moon landings in the future. There will be the need of a significant increase in funding for the competition, and that's going to be starting with the 2023 budget. After all, the Chinese space program is increasingly capable of landing Chinese taikonauts much earlier than originally expected. But whatever, we are going to be as aggressive as we can be in a safe and technically feasible way to beat our competitors with boots on the moon. This update does not affect later Artemis mission schedules and lunar surface plans, including the gateway development and the lunar surface activities around the late 2020s. Artemis II will be an incredible achievement for NASA and indeed for humanity. For the first time since Apollo 8, Artemis II will fly around the moon. It will take astronauts further into space, as I said, than any humans have traveled before. And this remains an exciting area and era for exploration, innovation, and discovery. But as a government agency and a global leader in exploration, it is our responsibility to taxpayers to be open and transparent. And I've been crystal clear with the team, and it's my duty to be as clear with the public by talking to you. NASA's operations and those of our commercial partners has to improve. There are several steps we are taking to better position the agency and the Artemis program for success. We announced the reorganization of NASA's human spaceflight programs, the Space Operations Mission Directorate, and the Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate. Operations and exploration. Creating two separate mission directorates will ensure these critical areas have a focused oversight team in place to support and execute for the success that we look forward to. We're also leveraging the speed and innovation of the commercial sector as we move forward. And part of that is looking at how we contract with our industry partners. For example, we recently announced Exploration Production and Operation Contract, EPOC, the RFI. The goal is to position NASA to support long-term exploration of the moon and beyond. And to do this, we want to streamline the SLS production operations, and we're going to consolidate multiple SLS contracts into a single production operations contracts, and as well as consulting with industry on the feasibility of having a long-term service provider for the rocket. This is in addition to the production operations contract that is already in place for the Orion program. And we're taking a different approach to how we develop our Moon and Mars architecture. For example, the agency has an open request to industry soliciting proposals from industry to provide spacesuits and spacewalk services. Under the services model, industry will be accountable for the design, development, qualification, and production of spacesuits and their support equipment to meet the needs of the International Space Station and Artemis. All that we build, all that we study, all that we do, it will prepare us to return to the moon and then go beyond. And we're moving forward. And for scientific discovery, for economic benefits, and for inspiring a new generation of explorers, the Artemis generation. All these ambitious plans are contingent on funding, and I'm going to continue to fight for sustained funding. Now it's my privilege to turn it over to our deputy, former astronaut commander, Colonel Pam Melroy.
Thank you so much, Bill. Hey, I want to start out by just thanking the dedicated NASA workforce. They've been working day in and day out with a unity of purpose to explore and land the next humans on the moon. And it hasn't been easy. They've been logging overtime and doing double duty in the middle of a pandemic. We recognize that extraordinary effort, and we're fully committed to the Artemis program both as an agency and also on behalf of the Biden-Harris administration. So over the years, I've witnessed development challenges on nearly every program I've worked on, from NASA assembling the International Space Station while I was an astronaut to advanced projects at DARPA. And that's the nature of our business. We work on big projects, and we do things that have never been done before. I do believe that many of the first-time development challenges on SLS and Orion are nearly behind us. Like Bill said, we know we've got to reduce costs and streamline operations. And he mentioned the EPOC RFI, and that's incredibly important. Kathy and Jim can discuss those plans in greater detail. What I see taking shape are the technologies, systems, and infrastructures that we need to live and work on around the moon and undertake incredible science, and the capacity to learn from those objectives and build on that so we can have a blueprint for how to do it at Mars and even beyond. This is one of the great undertakings of humanity that we're working on, and the scope of it, from SLS and Orion to Gateway, human lander, ground systems, communications, spacesuits, and more, is truly staggering, first at the moon and then at Mars. But we're NASA, and we will rise to the challenge. We have an incredible workforce, incredible international and commercial partners, and we're already in the trenches working hard and working smart. There are going to be challenges along the way, but we want to be open and transparent about them and work on solving those problems together. And we're working strategically with our partners to make sure that we keep focused on the big goals. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Kathy Lueders.
Thank you, Pam. You know, it's been about a month and a half since Space Operations Mission Directorate, sprung from the agency's reorganization of HEO, and I will tell you, we haven't slowed down our mission. Our Crew 2 astronauts returned safely to Earth last night, and we are diligently right now working towards a Crew 3 launch tomorrow, and with our Delta launch readiness review tonight. And next month, we'll be sending another cargo delivery to the space station. So human spaceflight is busier than ever before. I think one of my favorite things to see at the Kennedy Space Center right now is still to see that magnificent Artemis 1 stacked vehicle in the vehicle assembly building. And it gives us a peek at the mission coming up in the first quarter of next year. And I have heard from so many people, like Pam talked about, industry partners, international partners who have been down over these last few weeks and have just been in awe of seeing that site. As Minister Nelson mentioned earlier, we are happy, I'm very happy with the judge's decision that upholds our source selection of SpaceX for the HLS Option A contract. Ultimately, this partnership will result in the development of the initial demonstration lunar lander, which will take our astronauts from lunar orbit to the surface of the moon during that first crewed lunar landing demonstration mission under Artemis. So though we've been on hold, the SpaceX folks have continued to make progress, and like was mentioned before, the HLS team right now has resumed discussions with SpaceX to fully understand their progress to date and make sure we can align milestones to safely return humans to the moon. We are so excited to put astronauts on the moon for the first time in more than 50 years, and ultimately establish a long-term human presence at the moon for the first time ever. But this is just one part that the agency's broad efforts to engage with industry and enhance commercial readiness for our human landing system services. Jim will be letting us know more later on how the agency continues to work with U.S. companies to further mature our human landing system concepts to prepare for our recurring sustaining services under Artemis, as well as looking for new solutions related to our other capabilities that Pam mentioned. We know that the development of new capabilities is challenging, and through it we typically encounter challenges. But what is often overlooked is as we encounter challenges, we are creating learning, and that learning is not only helping us, it is learning that also benefits others across the space industry and even other industry. For example, one thing we had to learn how to do is to weld the massive SLS propellant tanks with state-of-the-art manufacturing processes. And one of our new companies coming up, Blue Origin, is also using that welding method. It's another place where we solved the problem and are sharing that solution with our industry partners. Yeah, we do understand that as we move from development to operations, we need to continue to optimize our cost performance and realign our operations capabilities while we retain our safety. So we are attacking that problem in two ways. One is with how NASA is organized. The Administrator talked about our recent organizational structure and restructuring. And it's helping us to have a Space Operations Directorate that can focus on optimizing how we do sustaining and operations And we are now working on that Space Ops Directorate structure that will do that. We've been meeting with the center directors, both Jim and I, with the center directors at the key HEO centers at Kennedy, Johnson, Marshall, Stennis, to understand what has been working well, but yet where there are opportunities for us to improve with the new organization. And as we optimize our processes within the Mission Directorate, we will continue supporting our astronaut and cargo missions, space station activity, and the economic development of space, while also supporting initial planning for Artemis lunar operations. We will continue supporting these exploration plans to complement our ESD counterparts who are taking on the development for tomorrow's space exploration systems, as SOMD will shift focus to the operations side of the spaceflight continuum. The second major effort we are doing is looking at how to move some of our key development contracts into more sustaining and operations constructs. The EPOC contract that was mentioned before is a way we are looking at restructuring delivery of the SLS rocket in a way that streamlines the development contracting approach and setting ourselves up for long-term Artemis missions. And it also creates a contract structure that will allow this rocket to become a national capability. This is a big change for us, and we know we need industry's help and involvement in this change. We have been having multiple industry discussions for over 6 months now, and like was mentioned, we recently released the EPOC RFI. The Industry Day kickoff for the RFI is tomorrow, and we are looking for feedback from the companies and asking for final input by the end of January. You know, this will be a critical stage for us as we're looking towards continuing to go through the procurement process and get ourselves ready for hopefully an award by the end of 2023. We know we need to continue to streamline our Artemis crew transportation costs to provide additional funding for us to develop the additional capabilities that will bring us to the surface of the moon and beyond to Mars. But this will take a partnership and will take a team from industry and NASA to carefully transition this capability from development to operations, and we can't afford to impact the interim missions along the way. Jim Free is a perfect partner for me to have within NASA as we work through this. Jim is leading the agency's development efforts for ensuring that we have the key capabilities to explore the moon and beyond. And I'll turn it over to Jim to talk more about the development work that is underway now. Jim Free, NASA's Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems Development, Mission Directorate.
Thanks, Kathy, and thanks for being a great partner. I've been on the job now about 45 days, and it definitely has been a busy month and a half. I've been able to see a lot of the hardware, the workforce, and even meet face-to-face with our international partners. So it's been a very exciting time to come on board. But for Artemis 1, as was mentioned, we completed the stacking of SLS and Orion, and Tom Whitmire and his team gave you an update a couple weeks ago on the testing that we have ahead of us before launch. We are targeting that February launch period, and certainly we'll keep everyone updated as we go through the testing that the team is doing every single day, as the administrator mentioned, and as we get closer to launch. We are targeting rollout for our wet dress rehearsal at the end of the calendar year. On Artemis 2, we're remaining focused on completing that vehicle while working Artemis 1, which is phenomenal. Work is underway assembling the crew module for Orion, and recently we received the second European service module for that mission as well. There's still a number of activities for Artemis 2 that will be first-time operations. It'll be the first time we're flying crew inside the vehicle. So we'll have the crew-specific systems that aren't there for Artemis 1, like environmental control and life support systems, and the displays, and all the software that goes to support those as backbones of the vehicle. As the administrator mentioned, we recently completed the rebaselining activity for Orion. Since the original agency commitments, we've added a great deal of scope to that development work, including the rendezvous proximity and docking capability, which is essential to be part of Artemis 3. We plan to complete that development before Artemis 2 and incorporate a demonstration of the proximity operations for Artemis 2 and then the full docking capability on Artemis 3. That additional scope leads to the rebaseline commitment for Orion of $9.3 billion. We'll continue to keep the teams working to an aggressive schedule so that we can launch Artemis 2 as soon as possible with this new capability. I want to make sure that we all remember that Artemis 1 and 2 are test flights that are part of the overall development work for SLS, Orion, and all of the complicated supporting ground systems that go with them. We'll continue the development work after those test flights for things such as the SLS Block 1B configuration for the exploration upper stage on Artemis 4. And then each mission beyond that continues to increase in complexity with new systems like the additional human landing system services, gateway, and surface elements. On Artemis 3, as has been mentioned, HLS has not been without challenges. We experienced the pause that the administrator talked about with SpaceX, and we are meeting with them currently to understand the impact of the delays on the entire development schedule. Since the court ruling last week, we have resumed that SpaceX work through a series of meetings that continue this week and in the coming weeks, and we're really eager to continue those discussions to determine the way forward to develop and demonstrate that human lander. After we understand the impacts and align our schedules with SpaceX, we'll have a much clearer picture on the new target date for putting those 2 astronauts on the moon. But as the administrator mentioned, we anticipate that now to be no earlier than 2025. The Option A contract is just part of our broader set of plans to partner with industry and develop the human landing system in the future. We partnered with 5 companies recently on our Appendix N effort to mature the concepts and develop risk reduction solutions. That work really bolsters the competition and increases commercial readiness for companies to provide that recurring service that we need from lunar orbit to the surface of the moon. And additionally helps us optimize our procurement strategy for competitive recurring services procurement. We're planning on issuing that draft request for proposals for services in early 2022, followed by a formal solicitation later that same year, open to all of U.S. industry. Another element of our exploration and architecture is spacesuits. And landing humans on the moon is a complex feat that requires integration of multiple components, including modern spacesuits. Leaning on the speed and innovation of the commercial sector and work on advancement of critical suit components and systems developed by the NASA team, the next generation spacesuits will be worn by astronauts on the space station first and during Artemis surface missions to help us achieve our bold exploration goals. We plan to make 1 or more awards next year, and we'll ask providers for demonstration missions as early as 2024. We're gradually building up our capabilities and demonstrating the systems we need to live and work at the moon and prepare for Mars. That's one of the reasons why you'll see our cost and schedule commitments connected to specific development efforts rather than per mission. And it really doesn't make sense to just total up all our development costs and divide by the number of flights, which is what you'll see in some reports. That would suggest you are just getting a mission for that price, not a whole suite of capabilities for exploring deep space now and the decades ahead. Artemis is really different from how we've approached exploration in the past. We're taking this new approach so that we can make new discoveries. Not only are we looking forward in everything we do to prepare for human missions to Mars, but we're bringing partners from around the nation and partners from around the globe with us. With significant contributions from our international partners in Europe, Japan, and Canada, Gateway will demonstrate long-term operations in deep space before we embark on missions to Mars. That Gateway remains on its current schedule. The Lunar Orbiting Outpost will provide unprecedented access to the moon, as well as increasing opportunities for science investigations that are being planned today. One of the notable differences in our Artemis plans is how we're infusing science into our plans from the beginning. We have science and utilization being designed and developed today that will be on Gateway. That includes our international partners. There are lunar exploration activities across the agency, and Artemis is the unifying theme for those efforts and endeavors. Thank you. Jackie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Jim. I'm sure everyone on the line has a lot of questions, so we'll move into the Q&A portion of the briefing. Alyssa?
Thank you. We'll now begin the question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your touch-tone phone. Make sure your phone is unmuted and record your name clearly when prompted. To withdraw your question, you may press *2. Again, to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name. We'll take a moment for questions to come through. Please stand by.
Thank you, and if you could please be sure to state who you're addressing your question to and stick to just one question at a time, that would be a huge help. First up, we have a question from Bill Harwood with CBS News. Bill?
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know if this is for the administrator or for Kathy, but Senator Nelson used the word probable with regard to 2024 and Artemis 2 and a likely slip to 2025 for Artemis 3. You know, until you guys really know where you stand on the lander, I'm curious why we're talking about dates at all, because it doesn't sound like there's any specificity at this point beyond you can't land in 2024 like the Trump administration was suggesting. So I guess I'm wondering, you know, why set even a vague target until you've had a better chance to talk to SpaceX to see where things stand on the lander? Thanks.
Bill, thank you for your question. We're responding to you all because you asked me months ago for specific timelines, and I told you until the court ruled, and as it ended up, it was two courts, an administrative procedure first, and then a federal court of claims second. And that took the better part of 7 months. And so with that court ruling, this was the very first opportunity to come to you. And what I said and what Kathy said and what Jim Free said was that we expect Artemis 1 in February, in just a few months. We expect Artemis 2 on or about May of 24. And for all the reasons then that I laid out, and I think I gave you about 4, we are estimating no earlier than 2025 for Artemis 3, which would be the human lander on the first demonstration landing that was won in the competition by SpaceX. And so we are giving you as much specificity, and I think quite a great deal of specificity, given the fact that we deal in an arena of cutting-edge technology and other things like COVID and litigation that get in the way. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Bill. Up next, we have Chris Davenport with the Washington Post.
Hi, thanks so much. I guess this is for the administrator or the deputy. You had said that, you know, this is going to require getting to the moon even in 25 will require sustained and significant funding starting in 2023. I'm wondering what sort of a dollar amount you're looking for to meet that goal, how big of an increase. And I'm sorry, I don't have my budget documents in front of me. When you say Orion is now re-baseline at $9.3 billion, that's up from what, if you could? Thank you.
All right, I'll turn it over to Pam after I try to answer your questions first. On the baseline, were you talking about Orion or were you talking about the rocket?
I'm talking about Orion.
Okay. Jim, you want to answer that?
Oh, the question was the new rebaseline number for Orion?
Yes.
And that is the previous agency baseline commitment was $6.7 billion.
Okay, and what's the other part of your question, Christian?
Yeah, you were saying you needed significant funding, likely starting in 2023. I'm wondering if what those budget requests will be, how much more money you need. I'm looking for, I guess, any sense of a dollar amount. You've been very good with the schedule. Now I guess I'm looking for the budget.
Yes, sir. I have not been shy about stating this, and I've stated it publicly several times. We need for a full-up competition, which the Congress has made in no uncertain terms their not only preference, but their strong urging to have a competition for the eventual lander. That would be about one a year over a 10-year period, and that number is $5.7 billion over about 6 years.
Thank you. Next up, we have Joey Roulette with the New York Times.
Hey, thank you for doing this. Question, I guess, for either Pam or Jim or Kathy or whoever wants to answer. Has SpaceX proposed, or have you talked to SpaceX about doing a direct Starship mission to the lunar surface without maybe docking with Lockheed's Orion, just kind of as a potentially quicker route? And if they do ever mention that, is that an option that NASA would consider? Thanks.
Yeah, I don't think that would work from a architecture perspective to do that directly. You know, I since like the administrator, I've not been able to talk to SpaceX since I came on, but I don't think that works from an architecture or orbital mechanics perspective. Yeah, and the crew would be transported up on Starship. The primary thing, right? We're taking the crew up on Orion. So if there was again, the architecture-wise, it just wouldn't work.
You want to refine your question, Joey?
Well, yeah, I was just saying, since there are additional delays and cost overruns with the Orion program, I was just curious if NASA ever considered alternative routes to the moon, only using Starship or other architectures, and if you could elaborate on why it doesn't work from an architecture standpoint, that would be great. Thanks.
Well, let me just point out, right now there's only one rocket that's capable of doing this, and this is SLS and Orion on top. And that's stacked as we speak in the VAB, and it's going to launch next February. So we're going with what we got, and if anybody comes up with another alternative, we're glad to look at any other alternative.
Next up, we have Kristen Fisher with CNN.
Thank you, everyone, for the update. My question is for Administrator Nelson or Deputy Melroy, since you just returned from Dubai. And my question is, what is your level of concern that this slip in the schedule could perhaps allow China to land taikonauts on the moon before the U.S. can return American astronauts to the moon? Thank you.
In my comments earlier, I said that we are facing a very aggressive and good Chinese space program. This has happened in the last few years, that we've seen them achieve quite a number of things. Think they put up a space station and within a short period of time put taikonauts on that space station. Think also, they are the second nation to land a rover on Mars and are preparing to do a sample return mission from Mars. No other nation save the U.S., and albeit we did it landing back in the 70s and have landed several times, no other nation has done that. Statements that the Chinese space program, which includes the Chinese military, have made give us indications that they are going to be very aggressive. We know, and they have stated, that they are going to the South Pole of the Moon. We know that they say they're going to do scientific experiments there. We know that they've already had missions to the moon robotically. So we have every reason to believe that we have a competitor, a very aggressive competitor in the Chinese, going back to the moon with taikonauts. And it's the position of NASA and I believe the United States government that we want to be there first back on the moon after over a half century. But we got a lot of stuff to do on the moon, including building habitats, learning how we're going to exist for long periods of time in that environment in order to prepare us to take astronauts to Mars. It's one thing to go 240,000 miles and back. It's another to go millions and millions of miles, get the planets in alignment, how long you have to stay on the surface, get the planets back in alignment so you can come back. That's why we're going back to the moon, to get ready to go to Mars.
Thank you. Next up, Michael Grushko with National Geographic.
Hi, thanks so much for taking my question. In previous, I think this might be for the administrator, but I'm open to others weighing in as well. In previously released schedules, even notional ones, there's been anywhere between a 14 to 17 month gap between Artemis 2 and 3. Now, beyond some of the uncertainties you've already touched on related to the human landing system, could you elaborate on some of the other factors, maybe it's ground systems, et cetera, that could further affect the timing between Artemis 2 and 3? Thanks.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so this is Jim Free. There's a number of factors. So Artemis 2, as I mentioned, is the first time we're flying crew. So we're going to learn a lot about the ecosystem and how that performs. So there's a potential for some understanding and operational changes we may need to make after flying crew for the first time. I mentioned at Artemis 2 we're going to do a proximity operations demonstration, and then for 3 we're going to have to dock. So things we learn about how the system performs, how we actually do the operations with the crew, how the vehicle flies, may be some things we need to modify. And then things we learn just processing the vehicle. Things we've learned from 1, we're hoping to pass on to 2. When we process on 2 and we actually are taking crew out to the pad and putting them in the vehicle, we're going to learn a lot that we may have to add time between 2 and 3 to factor in. So it's part of it's the learning, part of it's we need time to turn the pad. Also, there's that duration between the 2 as well. So that's a few examples off the top of my head.
Thanks, Jim. Next, we have Michael Sheets with CNBC.
Hi, all. Appreciate the update on the program. Administrator Nelson, I'm curious if I understand that the work hold only recently was released, but have you visited SpaceX's facility in Boca Chica, Texas, where they're developing Starship, or do you have any plans in the near future to stop by and see work on their side of the HLS Artemis program? Thanks.
Yes, we do. Pam and Bob and I are all going down there at the first opportunity, and it looks like that'll be after the first of the year. Remember, we got a lot of other exciting things going on between now and then. We've got a telescope going up on a French rocket that's going to go 1 million miles, and it's going to peer through a keyhole, and it's going to look back and capture light from over 13 billion years old, only 250 years after the Big Bang. That is a major mission. We've got the DART going up in December. It is going to an asteroid that revolves about another asteroid, and this asteroid is about 2,000 or 3,000 feet in diameter, so it's a big boy. You wouldn't want it to hit Earth. Well, we're going to see if we can move it in its trajectory, and we're going to ram it at 16,000 miles an hour. And those are just two of the exciting missions that are going on between now and Artemis 1.
Thank you. And next up, we have Irene Klotz with Aviation Week.
Thanks, Jackie. Good afternoon. I have 2 quick accounting questions and then a contracting question. On the accounting questions, maybe, Jim, if you have an updated SLS development cost through Artemis 2, and also is this $2.5 billion cost growth in Orion, are you saying that that's primarily due to adding the Prox Ops demo? And then the big picture question has to do with this Epoch RFI, if NASA anticipates there being or positioning SLS to be a commercial launcher, possibly competing with offerings by SpaceX, maybe Blue Origin, or is the idea behind moving to commercial service contracts some other idea in mind? Thanks.
Yeah, Irene, this is Jim. So the number through Artemis 1 for SLS is the $11 billion. And I'm sorry, your second question was the Prox Op demo?
The $2.5 billion cost growth in Orion, if that's primarily due to the Prox Ops demo.
Yeah, so remember, this goes back a number of years with Orion back to the 2012 time frame. So there were a lot of requirements changes between then. The Prox Ops demo is a major part of that. If you think about that system has to go on the hatch, and that has to be jettisoned during re-entry. So there's the complexity of the docking part, there's the complexity of all the sensors, and then there's complexity of making sure you can get that out of the way to get the crew home. So that is a major element, but there's a number of requirements changes. There's the RPOD, and then we've also taken into account a lot of the COVID delays that Orion experienced, both in supply chain and just keeping the program going. And then the third question was around SLS as a commercial. That probably goes to Kathy with her EPOC responsibility.
So I think, Irene, the key thing is we're working to get our current multiple contracts into a single production operations contract, and looking at ways that through that contract we can figure out how to potentially enable other people to be able to buy, that 42 metric tons to TLI, and have it be a shared investment and resource from a government perspective, because it is a unique launch capability. So that's our goal. We're obviously working through that on how to do that the best way and pretty early in the process, but, you know, obviously having lots of discussions about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Jeff Faust with Space News.
Good afternoon. A question about Artemis II schedule. You're now looking at as late as May of 2024, and I know previously the target was sometime in 2023. Is that delay simply the results of COVID supply chain impacts, or are there other issues driving the delay in that launch? Thanks.
Yeah, Jeff, this is Jim Free. So there's multiple factors in there. I mean, COVID's a big part of it, both in the workforce and also in the supply chain. We had some delays down at Michoud with after a number of the storms, with water getting in the facility and damaging some of the hardware, damaging some of the floor, damaging the tooling. Obviously, there were some problems in the roof as the water got in. So there's that delay. There's a portion of it is the avionics reuse, but that's only a portion of it. And then it's, the Artemis II is a complex vehicle. So as we've learned and started to integrate that Eclipse hardware, a little bit of delays with some of that installation and understanding. So when you add it all up, that's how it all is moved out.
Thanks, Jim. Brian Bender with Politico, please.
Hey there. Thanks for doing this. One quick question. I'm not sure who would be best positioned, but maybe you've covered this. I don't think I missed it. The new cost estimate for Orion, how much of an increase in that? In other words, what was the baseline prior to the $9.3 billion? That was my first question. And then the second was, as the administrator laid out, there's lots to do here, lots of buy-in from Congress that needs to happen. Have you briefed the president? Have you briefed the vice president as the chair of the National Space Council on all of this? And do you expect that we'll hear more from them about what's needed to be done to get this done and to beat the Chinese?
On your second question first, the answer is yes. I talked to the Vice President as recent as last Friday when the two of us were out at Goddard. So the answer is yes. And yes, also, there'll be plenty of discussion. The Vice President has called the first Space Council meeting for December the 1st. Jim?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And to your first question, the previous was 6.7.
Thank you. And next up, we have Eric Berger with Ars Technica.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much for doing this. I have two questions. The first is for Jim or Kathy on the contract to streamline SLS production that you've been talking about. The RFI says a private contractor should build it as a substantial cost savings, and it mentions a baseline per flight cost. Can you tell me what that cost is, the current baseline per flight cost? And the other question is for Senator Nelson. What is your sense of the purpose of Artemis? Is it, do you think, to build a long-term lunar settlement? Or is the purpose to go to the moon, learn what we need to go to Mars, and then get on to Mars? Thank you.
For your second question first, we're going back to the moon to learn what we need to do to extend human life for long durations and build habitats with the whole idea that we are going with humans late in the decade of the 2030s to Mars. There's a lot to learn. When you're 250,000 miles away, you better learn it, because then you're going millions and millions of miles away. And depending on the amount of propulsion that you have, how fast you could get to Mars, then will depend how long you have to stay on the surface of Mars in order for the planets to be in the alignment so that you could get back in the same amount of time that it took you to get there. So there's a lot to learn on the moon in order to go to Mars.
think we'd be really happy at some stage if we could get our launch and processing costs to between $1 billion and $1.5 billion. But we've got a little ways to go. Now that's total cost for both NASA folks that need to be doing work and obviously industry folks that need to be doing their part. There'll always be a partnership between the two of us, right? NASA will still need to do the mission assurance function because this is a crew transportation vehicle like we talked about. But we need our industry partners to be able to deliver that 42 metric tons to TLI in a safe and reliable manner. That would be our goal going forward. But we can always do better. The more money we pull out of this, the more money Jim has to go build new hardware and get us to the surface of the moon with HABs and get trans-HABs built and get power and infrastructure capabilities on the moon for us to further buy down risk and get us ready to go do our trips to Mars. And so that's our goal going forward.
Thanks, Kathy. Up next, we have Lauren Gresh with The Verge.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. So throughout this, you've emphasized the litigation that held up communication between SpaceX and NASA. But from videos and pictures down there, SpaceX has certainly been working very hard on Starship in the meantime. So I'm wondering if you could be specific about how the lack of litigation would have hastened that development process. And if there hadn't been a lawsuit, did you have hope that you'd still meet the 2024 deadline, even with the significant lack of funding from Congress? Thanks.
Because of the litigation for 7 months, we have not been allowed to have, under law, any contact with SpaceX until the litigation was continued. SpaceX, on their own, has continued their development without any payments by NASA as to the contract that has now been signed pursuant to the court decision just last week.
Next up, we have Andrea Leinfelder with the Houston Chronicle.
Hi, this question is for the administrator. The uncrewed landing on the moon that you mentioned, is that new or is that part of the SpaceX human landing system proposal? And also, I apologize, can you refresh my memory on to when Artemis 2 had been planned to launch? Thank you.
The uncrewed lander was always a part of the solicitation put out by NASA. That was part of SpaceX presentation. And so you might want to check to see what time frame that would be. I suspect that you might want to, that might be a page 1 story when it lands prior to sending the first crew to the surface. What was the second part of your question?
When was the Artemis 2 launch previously scheduled for?
Yeah, April of 23.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time, and we only have time for one more question. So to close this out, Marina Corin with The Atlantic, please.
Hi, 2 questions for the administrator. Is NASA still aiming to land somewhere near the South Pole, or will you consider other locations? And I'd like to get an answer to Lauren's question. You seem to draw a direct line between the holdup that the litigation caused and the schedule push to 2025 for the landing. Would 2024 have been possible if the litigation wasn't an issue?
If you'll go back and look at what I said earlier, I listed several things. I listed the litigation, that was 7 months. I listed less dollars from previous Congresses, and the Trump administration judgment that was not a goal of 2024. 2024 was not a goal that was really technically feasible. So I listed several things.
And to the other part of your question, are we still targeting the South Pole? The answer is yes. I mean, we don't have specific landing sites. We have a number of them that we're working closely with the Science Mission Directorate to understand. You know, they just announced the Viper landing site not long ago. We're beginning to discuss with them specific areas, but the South Pole still is our focus.
Thank you all so much. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I want to thank you for your participation, and an instant replay of today's call is available for 30 days by calling 888-566-0620. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you'll stay on the online stream for the premiere of a new NASA video about our Artemis program. Have a great afternoon.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.